Are you an entrepreneur or ready to become a boss? Welcome to Hawaii Boss, the business podcast made in Hawaii, where you will hear from island movers and shakers on who they are and their impact on our state. And now, step into the office of your host for Hawaii Boss, David Pettijohn.
All right. Aloha, Hawaii Boss podcast crew listening in out there or watching in out there or wherever you listen to your podcast. But this one is special because you can watch this podcast. You can come into the boss's office with us to see the folks in Hawaii who do business in Hawaii, who work in Hawaii and spend time here, how they work. And we want to find out how they're doing it, how they made it through the pandemic, and how as we're heading into the future, how do we do it? We're very fortunate today. We went to the boss's office all the way in Korea, if you can imagine that. We're in Korea with our very special guest today, Miss Jinyoung Lee Jinyoung이라고 하십니까?
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's correct. Jinyoung is Lee is my maiden name.
Lee is your maiden name, and Won is your current married name.
Yeah, so it gets kind of confusing sometimes, but I like both.
For us who've never, we get confused over here, but Hawaii does have a lot of folks from Korea. And so they learn that, okay, maybe the name isn't backwards, or they're saying it forwards and backwards, and they don't know which is the first name or the last name. So there's so many interesting things about the Korean culture, which brings us to you, because you've, as a writer, producer, director, wisdom from the Rainbow State, 무지개 나라의 유산이라고 합니다. Yes, and so this was, you took your skills, you came here, you loved Hawaii. I mean, people that come to Hawaii, they have a story. And then especially Koreans, they seem to move all in a group, or they have special stories to tell about how this person went through their challenges. And so it appears that this has led you to, creating this documentary series. And we're just very curious about you and also about this work that you do here with us. So again, Jinyoung, I haven't let you talk at all. Anyway, welcome and aloha.
Yeah, welcome. I mean, thank you and aloha.
Yeah, this is really exciting for us to talk to you. Again, your English is fabulous. People sometimes try to learn Korean, but it's very difficult. So anyway, I'm not going to practice on you, but certainly Korean is so interesting. The food, the culture, and also the migration of Koreans from they've migrated across the entire world. Must be a special kind of Koreans, or as you did identified those folks that were Korean ancestry that resided here in Hawaii and made their home here. Tell us a little bit about that vision that you had, and what brought you to want to make that. Why did you feel that was important?
I came to Hawaii like almost 20 years ago, and I lived in Korea for 20 years. When I first came to Hawaii, I just was fascinated by its landscape and how great people were, how great the landscape were. But I never thought that Hawaii has such a special connection to Korea.
Sure.
And in that next year we're gonna celebrate 120 years of the Korean immigration to Hawaii.
Sure.
So the Hawaii is the place that the Koreans started their history as an immigrant to the United States. So Hawaii is the first place that they kind of landed, the first group of Koreans. But when I was living in Korea, I never thought anything like that. I didn't know about it much. But while I was living in Hawaii, I worked as a journalist. I was writing for the Korea Times, the newspaper, and also was doing the news for Korean TV stations. So I was able to meet a lot of kind of prominent Koreans in Hawaii. And through those meetings, I was able to meet some, wonderful people and who are descendants of Koreans.
Right.
And whenever I meet them, I always was wondering, what is how was it possible? Like when they first came to Hawaii, their parents, people were working in a sugar cane plantation, and it's really harsh life
Yeah,
So
very
within the
labor intensive. They didn't come over as executives. They came over as they came over to work the fields, which is very tough work.
Exactly. And not knowing the language, not knowing the, culture, not just Korean, like Japanese and Chinese and Portuguese.
Right.
In early 1900, they, or late 1800, like a Portuguese, they came for better life. But then like within one generation, like I see some people who became a really important part of this community of Hawaii.
Like Mayor Kim. Mayor Kim was one of them, famous on the Big Island as the mayor, longtime mayor and sort of emergency response person. Yeah.
So whenever I met those people who are really, good people and who have parents or grandparents who came here as an immigrant, I was wondering how was it possible? When parents had that kind of like harsh life, still they were able to raise, wonderful people, with good heart and good ethics. So I was need to see, what the secret was.
Right.
How was that possible?
Okay.
And then through those children's voices, I wanted to archive their history, the Korean immigrant history. So it was like two different things, like archiving the history. I wanted to do for the future generation, because I know how much sacrifice there was for us to be done, for us to be here, which I never knew about. And so I wanted our future generation to know that. But then,
so that's sorry to cut you off, but that's sort of a Korean thing, that to know the struggle, the gosang, the sugohashasumida, you work, so you've been through so much. It's sort of it's a greeting that they do with each other. And so you wanting to tell this, what they've been through, and that's the story of the Korean, that's the Korean saga, I guess, is that, they've been through so much. And even here, how did they make it? And so just to be able to pass that on to those folks. So again, like as a history of that, again, that very special culture that people might not understand.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to, reveal those history and share those history with our future generation, but through their children's voices.
Right.
So that, and then through like the interview, I did realize that there's so much to tell, other than the history that we read from the history book, because it's, the children's voices, they're like, they remember things.
Right.
Mayor Kim, for example, his mom was a picture bride. So she came to Hawaii when she was only like a 20 or early 20, late, was a teenager. Some of the picture brides came to Hawaii for better life just by looking at this photo of, men who were working at a sugar plantation.
Right. I think that was happening in most of the countries back home. I think that was sort of the way it was done. There was no Snapchat, this was kind of the way that, swipe right, swipe left, whatever it's the new, it was that was what it was back then. Introductions by people, or whatever. So you can kind of get a history about them. So anyway, a different culture now, certainly, but very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But knowing that, like it's a different culture now. So it's even hard to imagine how can someone take a 1 month travel to the destination that was not known so much, just to pursue something better than what you have back then in Korea. And when they arrive here, oftentimes they realize their husbands are not same as the one on the photo, or they're much older. Or some guys had a alcoholic issue, or some have like drug issues, just because they were going through a hard time their own too. Young 20s, 30s, working in the sugar plantation for so many hours. Some people were, took a kind of really harsh personal life as well. So
it was a very wild situation with alcohol and all those things. All men working together and working those long hours.
I
Challenging.
mean, obviously not all. A lot of people were working, really hard, very good. But then some people were having issues. And when the picture bride found out, some of them, I don't know, like a lot of them, left their husband and they just had their lives all of their own. It was just their spirit is just amazing. I just was really
the
fascinated by the
independent
story.
and resilient nature of the Korean spirit, I think, shows through over and over again, because they are able to settle, oh, there's Koreatown, they are able to settle. They have this way that they can move to I used to say a diaspora, where Koreans sort of expand out into the world, but they always leave their mark wherever they go. It's not like they automatically just mingle in. There's a lot of security. Right. There's a lot of security in that culture. And so outside of the great people you met, there's also a large other folks that you met. As the Koreans are involved in every part of the Hawaii culture here. Currently, like in the current day, there's Korean restaurants and different businesses built around that. You may not even have to speak English to kind of get what your business is done. There's a few people that do. So it's an interesting place. So what is it because of that keeps you here, that community that still remains, or is it just the beauty of Hawaii?
Oh, it's for sure. It's the people. Like, I was interviewing the current mayor of Honolulu, Rick Blangiardi.
Blangiardi, yes, sir.
For this documentary. And he was saying really the thing that I was having in my mind. The Hawaii Tourism Office, they had this slogan, according to him, that something like people come and visit Hawaii for its beauty of the landscape, but then people get to stay here for the people of Hawaii.
Right.
I mean, it's
very
so
thoughtful.
special. Yeah, and I think it's so true. It's so special that through this documentary, I learned that of course Korea went through a lot, and their sacrifice and their love for the future generation were touching. But also, I just realized how special Hawaii is. They're so accepting of other ethnic groups, not just Koreans. Like they live together. They coexist with Aloha basically.
Which is very interesting they're not so segregated. They're able to get their resources done in their own community. Like there's a Filipino community, there's a Japanese community, and there's that heritage that they still, celebrate. But then they celebrate it next door with your Chinese neighbor, your Japanese neighbor, and everyone kind of gets involved. Hey, let me show you my culture. Hey, let me show you my culture. And it's a wonderful place to sort of, like you say, aloha. There's no big divisions about these interactions with folks, because it's just been going on for so long. We just kind of melt together, but we still maintain our own sort of cultural history.
Exactly. That's the beauty of Hawaii. I truly think, the landscape is beautiful, of course, but then I think how accepting, how generous people are. And I hope we remain like that, for the future generation as well.
Well, if anybody, of course, that's our whole goal is on Hawaii Boss is that, how do we move forward to do business and to work and live in Hawaii with aloha, and keep that and maintain that so it doesn't become something else. But you spoke of, there's the people, there's the beauty, but somehow as a writer, producer, director, you've got to be able to sort of take those. And it's beautiful. Again, the name of it, Wisdom from the Rainbow State. And it looks like there's some other productions that you're doing as well, with the Korean consulate and some different things. But again, we'll talk about that. But putting all that together in a way that's beautiful with the music and that just really entices you. And everybody loves Korean dramas, so I don't know if it's a part. But the aesthetic was very beautiful. As I was watching it, and again the way that you narrated it as well, and it's a challenging thing to put all that creativity to make a product like that. I'm sure it was difficult, and we'll talk about that process and how maybe difficult it was. But take us back. When did you first realize that this is something that you wanted to do? Did you always know that you were going to be a news reporter?
No, I didn't know. My grandfather, Harabuji, he used to joke that, I would like to see Jinyoung when she grows up. When you grow up, he was telling me that, when I turn on the TV, I like to see you on the news. I guess he wanted me, maybe because I was kind of chatty when I was little. Okay.
Maybe but, you're not sure.
Yeah, but I don't want to say that I was chatty, I guess.
That's right. I was no confession, sure. Right.
Yeah. But it's too bad that my grandfather passed away already by the time that I really became a news anchor in Hawaii on the Korean TV station. But Yeah, I've been producing like a SNS, video series for Hawaii Tourism Office, and I've been writing a lot of books on, like 6 books on the traveling in Hawaii.
Right.
So you can see that my interest was in kind of traveling, how to enjoy Hawaii and all that.
Right.
But when I got to know this history side, oh my God, it was another level of a story. There are so many great stories to tell and all that. So I, decided to make this a film, Words of Wisdom from the Rainbow State. But even though, my passion was I wanted to make a film, I couldn't do it right away because filmmaking is so different from, TV producing or writing, right?
Sure.
Right.
It's a longer term project, sort of a longer term.
Longer term, and then it's a teamwork basically, right? Like being a news anchor, like being a writer is like, if I do well, I can make it, possible with some help, with some editor, some producer. But then to make a film, you need a editor, you need a videographer, you need so many different people, like computer graphic designer and all that. And so I didn't dream of making a film. I thought that's something that I can never do it. But there was I don't have one specific mentor for my career, but then there's one person who really helped me in my career transition from a news anchor to a filmmaker, much easier and smoother. His name is Joseph John, and he's my good friend who made a documentary film about the third generation Korean Cuban.
Okay. So a similar vein to what you were doing, that diaspora evaluating, how did they, and that's very interesting. Cuba, which is sort of we don't know a lot of information about it. So it's really a window in through the Korean eyes of, communist Cuba. That's very interesting.
It is. And so like, you're right. When Joseph was working as a lawyer in New York City, he took a trip to Cuba and was fascinated by this person's story. Then he gave up his career as a lawyer and spent 2 years to produce this wonderful film. And seeing him made me think, maybe, I also can maybe do that, it's not something that I can never do it, So he kind of, not only he inspired me, but he helped me in every steps of the production by answering my questions and listening to my complaints and all that, in my first filmmaking. And when I finally got to start my film, so many people in Hawaii helped us complete the film. Like, even though the fund from the Korean consulate covered a significant part of the production cost, I needed additional funding, which I was unable to obtain, partially because I think this was my first film.
Sure.
But then the reason why I still was able to complete this documentary is because I had so many people in Hawaii who helped us. And even though the fund from the Korean consulate was significant part, the help that I got from different people were really the thing that made it possible. And all those contributors were like my mentors in a sense, because they taught me the true generosity and passion and sharing and all that.
Sure. So you had taken those previous years and built around yourself already a network of other professionals that helped you to, I guess, expand your vision. Like you say, all those people, mentors, like peers, but charging, especially me, it's this creative type of folks. Maybe they all kind of they're excited when other people are creating.
Right, and they're so generous. A lot of people, that what it's like. So really, a lot of them are willing to share their time, their knowledge, and all that. So it's really. And
I think that's what has made the podcast successful, because people like you are really trying to hey, if I knew this when I was younger, maybe I wouldn't make this mistake or that mistake. Were there other things that you wanted to do besides this?
Besides
in media and filmmaking and things? Were there, did you have a dream when you were young? I know your grandpa says being
a good question. I always was interested in good stories. Basically, I loved reading and writing, and everyone has a story to tell. So I wanted to be a messenger, but I didn't know what kind of messenger. So my first job was an editor for Allure Korea, which is a sister magazine of the Condé Nast Traveler, the American magazine. Okay. And being a magazine editor was different from being a news anchor, or being a newspaper or a radio person, which I went through. But but bottom line is same, I think, telling a story.
Right.
And even from young age, like when I was in college or high school, I always knew that I want to be a writer or this kind of messenger, like storyteller. There was not anything else I wanted to become. You know what? I played cello for a long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there was a one time that I wanted to become a cellist from maybe 10-year-old to, let's say, 15 years old. My mom thought I would become a cellist, and I thought I would become a cellist. But I realized that I don't have that 1% talent that musicians use, and I
it becomes very there's a very yo-yo ma is like this, and you start to realize when you're playing around these other ones that they're at a whole different and that's a challenge sometimes level. And that's hard. Korea is so competitive with the education and different things and pathways. Developing a career in the US compared to you developing a career in Korea, it sounds like you were able to do that sort of simultaneously, develop it here in Hawaii. And tell us the difference between what you see is developing a career in the US versus the sort of the hard what do they say, salaryman type jobs, where it's very difficult to move up, and you're kind of in the grind with 80 hours a week and stuff. So tell us about the difference there.
Some of my crews of this film industry are in Hawaii, and some of them are in Korea, because my editor is in Korea. I work with the Korean editor, but I work with the Hawaiian videographer. And my writing publisher is in Korea, but then I work in Hawaii too. So I see different groups of people. Before, there were a lot of difference, I think, between Korean or Asian in large versus Hawaii or US in large, but not that much nowadays. I don't feel or see it, just because it's, with being global, they know, global manner and all that. But still, the greatest difference I feel is in their mentalities. Like, Americans are highly individualistic, and so they value personal achievement more than the collective achievement. But Korea is not that much. It's more like the other way around. And Koreans, I feel like, tend to ask sometimes highly personal questions in business settings, like if I'm married sometimes, you know what I mean? But it's not because they're rude, but because Asian culture in general value personal relationship far more than impersonal business relationship, even in the business setting, I realized. And another difference is that I see always and feel is that Koreans value expediency when making business decisions. Time is money in Korea, for sure. If I send an email asking questions, I will get the answer like within a day or two, especially if it's business related. In Hawaii, there's a Hawaii time.
It's hard to explain, but you can't buck it. You can't go against it, because you can only move as fast as it can move.
Right. You know what I mean? But then, like, in the beginning, I was kind of frustrated because working as an editor for all over Korea, I was so used to, communicate, such rushed time frame. So when I came to Hawaii, when I was writing for the newspaper, I was thinking, like, how come everybody's so relaxed? But later, after a few years, I realized, why were we so rushed in Korea? There's like, if I can answer on Monday, why do I have to tell myself that I have to write this email by Friday? There's no urgency. So, like, I became more, how I started. I think I value that more nowadays, because I have family in Hawaii. I try not to work on the weekends and all that. So it's just there's like a different. But then when I receive an email from my Korean peer or Korean crew, I automatically, get to continue to
because it's a different speed. They're expecting a different speed.
Exactly.
We work differently. So you become sort of in the middle. You can translate to the other folks. Well, no, and then you can kind of translate back to your corporate office. I'm sure they're all jealous that you're over here and doing all this work.
I try to fill in the gap, for sure. But I'm still learning, for sure. Even after living in Hawaii 19 years, there's a difference, but not as much before.
Right, and I think I've just recently heard that they're changing the visa for certain things to create a different avenue for folks to go and live and work in Korea, which is, again, they're needing more employees, and and folks, and certainly folks, talented folks from Hawaii, would be able to fill some of those needs. But again, it's an interesting relationship. How often do you get a chance to go back and forth?
I go like every 6 months.
Okay, that's not too bad. It's a long trip.
Yeah, it's a long trip, but I enjoy being myself in the plane, kind of quiet and yeah.
So what other projects maybe do you have? Are you working on anything right now?
Oh yeah, so the Words of Wisdom from the Rainbow State, my documentary series, it's a 7 episodes, and the 6 episodes, and 5 of them have an interview, with Korean descendants like Mayor Kim or the Chief Justice Moon, who had a lot of stories to tell, and I realized that some parts are really precious. So I am collecting those words to make it into an exhibit. So I'm working with the Korean Immigrant Museum in Incheon, where first Korean groups were leaving from. There's a port in Incheon city. So we're doing an exhibit at the end of this year. So I'm preparing for that too. And then I like to produce season 2 of Words of Wisdom from the Rainbow State by meeting different Korean descendants of Korean immigrants to Hawaii to share their story.
Yeah, I'm sure when you did the first round and everyone got wind of it, they're like, well, what about my grandmother? She's got a great story, and my grandmother. So then you,
for some people,
with that, you've built, more relationships and it looks like the work that you have working with the state of Hawaii or different businesses in Hawaii that, specifically tailor to Korea, and they want to get their Hawaiian goods and things to market over there. It seems like they would use the media platform that you have. Is it difficult for people in Hawaii to try and gain access to that market, or in your media experience, there's always commercials and different things. Where does the media play a role, I guess, in helping Hawaii, reach out to Korea?
You mean let me get your questions right.
Sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You want to do this part? Let me just get it right. So the general people or the business people?
Business folks that are trying to get, because you have a media set up with, the news, and you're making documentaries, but you also have this network of folks who do news stories from Hawaii. How do they get in the commercial? If they want to gain access to that market,
Korean market.
Korean market. Are they coming to your channel, and how does Hawaii been able to interface with the different Korean media groups?
I see. That's a good question. That's a good business question, actually.
Right.
There are a few public relations companies in Hawaii that has a network of the Korean medias. So I think Hawaii businesses that want to reach out to Korean media, a lot of them work with this PR company in Hawaii.
Okay.
To reach them, or more economical way, I think, is for them to get in touch with the Hawaii Tourism Office in Korea. So it's a Hawaii Tourism Authority has a Korean office. So when they reach out to them, sometimes they include the businesses in their newsletter.
Oh, I see. I see.
And Hawaii Tourism Korea has this newsletter that they send out to all medias in Korea. So that's a good way to promote. And also, there's a Korean TV station that I used to work at KBFD, the local TV channel.
Where all the Korean dramas, you can watch all the Korean dramas. And the K-pop bands.
And then there's a Korean newspaper called Korea Times. And then there's a Korean radio station locally in Hawaii. So the restaurant, like small businesses, if they want to reach to Koreans in Hawaii, then they advertise their stuff in those Korean medias in Hawaii. And because those media are seen by travelers from Korea, oftentimes they watch the news in a hotel room, or they read the newspaper when they go to Korean supermarket. They get some customers there too.
Sure.
Sometimes it can be kind of costly to hire their own PR person, but having the PR staff will be the most efficient way, I think, to reach out to Korea.
Right, because they already have sort of a network sort of mapped out in Korea. They know people already on the ground over there, and they may have some. Yeah, it's interesting.
Right. I'm sorry. And then also, no, with the social media being so active these days,
anybody
sometimes they
can do
take
it.
a
Anybody can
right,
do
right,
it. Right.
exactly. And something like this, the Hawaii boss that you're doing, it's a great, I think, channel that because it's first of all, it's available for free. So
Right.
if Koreans are interested in Hawaii businesses, a lot of them actually ask me, what can I do in Hawaii? Because everyone who visits Hawaii wants to live in Hawaii, right? Like,
Right.
at least a month in a year. That's a dream life. So
Right.
to do that, they want to start a small business for them to have an excuse to come to Hawaii. But then they don't know what's, other than the tourist company or the small restaurant, what can you do? So something like this will give them a kind of different window to
look at
show the Hawaii.
Yeah, because we just did an interview with folks at the mall, Makana Kai, and so they have mall opportunities, and you see like Korean bakeries, and different things up in Ala Moana and different Korean.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean they're trying to make inroads here and be successful, but it's it's tough to find information, especially with the language barrier.
Right.
Yeah, but it
especially
sounds like,
with the language barrier.
Yeah. So, but it sounds like you've mastered English. So.
No. Just learning, but.
That's what Koreans all have to say that, right? Or they say "Chikorimankum 못합니다," or so. Is that what it is?
Right. Where did you learn all this Korean?
Well, I happened to be in the army, and they taught me Korean for a little bit, and then
cool.
and then I went there as a missionary and teaching and things. But it was every time I go to I keep it up. I can't do complex conversations, but if I go to a Korean restaurant, I try and order in Korean and impress my friends. But that's about as far. If we start talking geopolitics, I'm in trouble. But tell us. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's exciting, and that's why Hawaii is cool. And I like to say too, because there's so many Korean people that I can talk with. I was in a CNA class, and there was a Korean woman there who was taking the class. Her English wasn't so good. I was able to translate and help out a little bit with that. So anyway,
nice.
it's fun to use the language, and I think you're using this language of art and creativity and sharing a message to a huge audience, the Hawaii and U.S. audience, because it's in English. It's I guess it's made you have English subtitles and again, you're making it available, and people get to see this history and this value of the values of the culture of Hawaii and how it works here in Hawaii. It's I think it's anyway, to be a historian, I guess you're a historian. And
I'd feel honored if I was called a historian.
Sure.
But I was just a storyteller of those historians, I should say.
Sure. Well, I mean, but when you bring it together like that, and you help to share an entire message, and we're looking forward to. It sounds like the more work that you're doing to share more about this wonderful culture, and we welcome it. Again, in Hawaii, we welcome, like you said, and we talked about earlier, we welcome everyone. And
Right.
I wish we had more time, because there's so much more to talk about, and I hope we can talk together in the future. But before we let you go, we have a couple of fun questions just to find out a little bit more about you.
Oh, sure.
Is that okay? We'll just hit you with a couple of questions. Okay, good. So listen, you got to tell us where your favorite Korean restaurant is. I can go there and I can tell them that I know Jinwon. She's my friend, and we can, I'll get the best service.
Right. I have a higher standard for Korean restaurants just because I'm Korean.
Sure.
So there's no one restaurant that I can, say this is the best. But just for my personal taste, I go to Millionaire on Kapiolani and Ward Avenue. That was used to be Podunamujip. That place is good because their ambience is good, very clean.
Okay.
It's good for business meetings since they have a nice rooms too. They have a nice set menu, and the kalbi is good, but their price is a little bit higher.
Well, Kakaako, that's kind of sort of bougie now. Sort of a little bit. Well, yeah. It's kind of that where some of the nicer places can go. Yeah.
Right. But
Million. It's called Million, huh?
Millionaire or Million or something like that. Either something with the million.
Okay.
Was used to be Podunamujip. And then I go to Cafe Princess Pig. It's like they open at nighttime. They have a karaoke room too, and they have a good street food, like a tteokbokki and like a beer, the snack that you will eat with the beer.
Yeah. It's drinking food.
Drinking food, yeah. And then you can sing a song after you had like 2 glasses of beer or something. And then I go to Choice Kitchen for takeout. It's a very small restaurant, and that has like a different bunch of banchan where you can choose what to add in your box, lunch box.
That's the one that I get disappointed. Sometimes I go to a restaurant and the selection of banchan that they provide, I'm kind of like, that's when I know.
Right.
Oh, maybe I got to go to the next place next time. But if they have if their side dishes are good, then okay, all right, we can stay here for a little bit, right? That lets us know.
Right. That's a good sign that banchan can be a good thing to see if their real food is good or not. And then there's a Korean Chinese. There's like authentic Chinese, but then there's a Korean.
Yeah, you can get
jajangmyeon. Right.
Yeah, jajangmyeon and no, not jajangmyeon, and then jampong and
right.
The tangsuyuk is the famous.
Tangsuyuk, right. Yeah. So it's not Chinese, but it's a Korean plus Chinese, I should say. And I like Dowon, Dowon. I think it's on Alam Wana and PE Koi, I think. And that place has good jajangmyeon and jampong.
Oh man, that sounds so good. I like the drinking food you were talking about. I don't drink, but it reminds me. I lived in Shindangdong in Seoul, and that was tteokbokki-gyo. And all day long. You put the ramen in it, and there's 15 different ramen, tteokbokki places, and it's so funny to. But then we go back there, and they're trying to come in. Hey, I got a special. Anyway, it's so fun to go in Korea there and just experience that. And it's nice to be able to bring that food here and be able to experience that. We'll have to find the best place to go. It sounds like to go have some karaoke. Koreans love their karaoke. It sounds like.
Right. Yeah. They all love singing and drinking.
That's right, because it's community. Yeah, it's it's how we get together and unwind and get ready to face the next day. So I get that. So do you have a favorite? As you talk about music, I'm sure there's Korean music groups that you like. BTS is sort of old hat. I'm not sure that's kind of for the kids, but tell us about your. Do you have a favorite American music group?
Yeah, I like kind of quiet music. I like Nora Jones, and I like. Have you heard of Pink Martini? Pink Martini has a great band music, and they use a lot of string instruments too.
Okay, there's your cello days coming back to you. Okay,
right. They one time had a concert at a Blue Note in Waikiki.
Okay,
and I just really loved it. They're located in somewhere on the mainland, I think California or New York, but then they made a visit to Hawaii. It was awesome. And then I love Yo-Yo Ma too, and not just his playing, but what he does with his career. He a lot of times collaborates with different musicians, and being a Chinese American, he also had a lot of recording with the traditional instruments of Asia. And
right. I've seen him with those ones that he plays it's on the ground, and he plays that one. I forget the name of that one, but
is that right? Yeah. Something like that. And And then he plays for peace a lot during this pandemic. He was recording one piece every few days to just cheer the people in the medical field and all that. Online, it was available on his SNS. It was beautiful.
Well, again, there's when someone is creative and then applies that art and that skill and that talent, towards, something and create something beautiful that lasts. Music is one of those things. I think that the video and the work that you're doing is that. But there's got to be some times as you're creating all this work and you're here in Hawaii, and what do you miss most about Korea?
Maybe the culture. The Hawaii is good. The strength of Hawaii, I think, for me, is the nature. The nature sound, the ocean, the mountain. It cannot be. But culturally, Seoul is as a metropolitan city has so many different cultural events, like different orchestras, different exhibits, and all that. But Hawaii, I hope that we will have more musical events other than the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra.
Right.
And I really appreciate the fact there's a Hawaii Symphony Orchestra that we can enjoy. But hopefully, more cultural events, because that's the thing that I most miss about being in a big city.
Sure. And sounds like the opera is opening back up and having
is that right?
Has 3 shows
Hawaii
planned
Opera.
for 22-23 season, and they're playing.
That's awesome.
They're going to be at the Blaisdell. It sounds like. So that's
great.
That's good news, and it's I mean the culture of Korea, it's especially the 4 seasons, right? Hawaii, you kind of miss that, the mountains, and the cool air, sometimes that brisk air.
Right. The foliage and, the snow, it's beautiful.
Right.
But I just love Hawaii weather.
Yeah. It's pretty to look. It's pretty to look at the snow. That's what I think too. It's pretty to look at. But, yeah, I'll just take pictures.
People you and me live in Hawaii, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. There's plenty to do here, and I don't mind being warm once in a while. Too hot, but
exactly.
Awesome.
Same.
Well, listen, Jinyoung, we can call it Jinyoung Shi. It's been so very good to meet with you and spend some time and find out some more about you. I think I'm sure we'll continue to hear more about you, and as the work that you does, makes a mark for those people that you're trying to memorialize, I think, and to share this great message of the sort of the work ethic and the beautiful culture that Korea brings to Hawaii. So
thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, as the folks listening out there about
thank you everybody for watching, and as I said, I do think Hawaii is special, not only because Korean, but also so many different people from so many different countries came for better life, and they really sacrificed their lives and their time and everything. And I hope that we do not forget what was done for us to be here, and then hopefully we will make something even better for our future generation.
That's right. We thank you so much. We all have to learn how to be grateful for what our folks have passed down to us, and the life that we lead is because of them. And so thank you for the great example that you're providing, and we hope to have you back real soon.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been my pleasure. And until next time, aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to Hawaii Boss and follow us on social media at Hawaii Boss Podcast at the links in the description. We'll see you soon in the boss's office.